Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Arlecchino is coming and so am I. To show you how a Constellation 0 Arlecchino disciplines her enemies with a free-to-play friendly weapon, the White Tassel. We'll see just how incredible the knave can be with a 3-star weapon. The Grim Reaper, known as Death itself, ready to reap the souls out of any insolent mortal, is also the father and babysitter to a group of rambunctious kids. Now, don't worry, no geriatric hamsters were harmed in the making of this video, just pigeons. And my wallet, after realizing she has a scythe and a demon wing. Hoyoverse took off the kid gloves for her. We got the usual promotional content and even an animated short that was so well made that it reminded me about that Genshin Impact anime that still hasn't come out yet. Anyway, Traumakino's traumatic childhood aside, we're here to see what makes the knave worthy of being the 4th Fatui Harbinger in actual gameplay. Arla Daddy will be using the 4-piece Gladiators finale for this showcase. Know that the new Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy artifact set can increase her damage by about 4 to 8%, but rest assured, the Gladiators is a great alternative in the meantime. She'll be using the White Tassel for most of this video, and of course, she's at Constellation 0 throughout, and her talents are fitting for our Father Kino at 10, 9, and 9. We'll start as we always do, by disciplining our rambunctious Regisvine with Arlecchino's uninfused basic attacks, Invitation to a Beheading. Right out of the box, her basic attacks just deal physical damage and are not that effective as a disciplinary tool, although they surprisingly still chunk the Regisvine for a decent amount of health. As for her charged attack, you can actually use it to zoom around, and it's surprisingly fast and long-lasting as well. Now, it does come with the unfortunate side effect of draining your stamina, which could earn the Grim Reaper a sudden date with the actual Grim Reaper. Next is Arlecchino's elemental skill, All is Ash. Her skill generates 5 particles and applies the Blood Debt directive onto nearby enemies, which deals a bit of pyro damage every 5 seconds. More importantly, after 5 seconds, the Blood Debt directive turns into a Blood Debt Dew, which is indicated by this shinier icon on the enemy. If Arlecchino uses a charged attack, she'll then absorb the Blood Debt directives and Blood Debt Dews near her. Absorbing a Blood Debt directive will give her 65% Bond of Life, whereas absorbing the enhanced Blood Debt Dew provides Arlecchino with 130% Bond of Life. So why does this Bond of Life even matter? At 30% Bond of Life or higher, she gains Mask of Red Death. Yep, we've just started showcasing her kit, and the Regisvine is already properly disciplined, aka dead. If there are multiple enemies, she can absorb up to a maximum of 145% Bond of Life through a single use of her skill. Okay, so this next part is a bit confusing, but try to bear with me. The Bond of Life to Health Bar ratio is 2 to 1. With 130% Bond of Life, it takes up 65% of her health bar visually speaking. Arlecchino can also go up to a maximum of 200% Bond of Life to fill up the bar, but this requires 2 elemental skill uses to achieve, since each elemental skill can only add up to 145% Bond of Life. Let me know if that made sense to you down in the comments below. And finally, killing an enemy marked by Blood Debt will immediately provide Arlecchino with 130% Bond of Life, and that will of course count towards the 145% maximum that each skill can provide her. This is so if you accidentally kill the enemy with the Blood Debt mark, Arlecchino still gains Bond of Life and isn't dead weight for 30 seconds. 30 seconds you say? Yeah, her skill has an outrageous 30-second cooldown. Fortunately, every hit from her basic attack while in the Mask of the Red Death state will reduce her skill's cooldown by 0.8 seconds, and her burst also resets its cooldown. During the Mask of Red Death, the screen gets dark and she gains Pyro Infusion, and her basic attack multiplier increases significantly. For the math nerds like me out there, her current Bond of Life is multiplied with this Mask of Red Death multiplier listed in her basic attack, and then this is added to her normal attack multiplier. So in this example, her first N1 here has a very impressive multiplier of 403.3%. This is a normal attack multiplier, by the way. Every hit during Mask of Red Death causes her Bond of Life to go down by 7.5% of her current Bond of Life when she hits an enemy. So as she hits the enemy with more attacks, her multipliers go down along with her Bond of Life. Once her Bond of Life goes under 30% of her HP, she loses her Pyro Infusion and becomes much less of a terrifying father. As for her AoE, while it's certainly no power washer, it's large for a melee character. It is even able to slightly pull in smaller enemies, which really makes it feel like you're using a scythe. Up next we have her Elemental Burst, Pale Moon Rising. Arlecchino shushes her children and then deals a decent amount of damage. But more importantly, it absorbs all nearby blood debts and heals Arlecchino by the amount of Bond of Life that she has, plus some of her attack stat. Unfortunately, it also removes all the Bond of Life from Arlecchino herself. Basically, it's mainly an emergency healing button, although it also does a bit of damage, and it can also be used to reset her E's cooldown. Surely she can't be so good at disciplining her enemies and have no caveats, right? Well, with this passive, she also gains 40% pyro damage the moment she enters combat. Oh right, and her caveat, she can't be healed. Yep, her allies can't heal her in combat. Her burst is the only way for her to heal in actual combat. Fortunately, to mitigate this a little bit, she decided to replace her exploration passive with a defensive passive, which provides her up to 20% damage mitigation at 3000 attack. Her not being able to be healed is crucial for her kit, since otherwise her Bond of Life would be removed by fellow healers. But her not being able to be healed also makes it much more punishing for when she actually does take damage. Fortunately though, she can be healed outside of combat in the overworld, although it will remove her Bond of Life as well. Anyway, let's see how her full kit does against a much stronger and more rambunctious orphan, the Robot Chicken. Now her kit might seem complicated, but in practice, a wise philosopher once said, use skill, wait for shiny X, charge attack to absorb shiny X, swing big fire stick, ouchies, if in pain, use shh. As we can see, Arlecchino's raw pyro damage, even with just the White Tassel, is already very impressive. And just for fun, let's see what she can do if she starts off with 200 Bond of Life. Yep, she's even more insane if she can pre-stack some Bond of Life, which is actually quite practical in the overworld. Her first N1 here's with 200% Bond of Life has a multiplier of 569%. Yeah, this is a mind-blowing number for a normal attack multiplier. although getting 200 Bond of Life without her signature weapon is not very practical in the Abyss. Let's next see how Father does in a full party, starting with an overloaded Chevreuse team. This, unsurprisingly, effortlessly, comfortably, and oppressively single-cycled our robot chicken friend. But full disclosure, my Chevreuse and Bennett are both at Constellation 6, which provides her with a significant amount of bonus damage. However, trust me bro, this Frappuccino team is still amazing. Get it? Because her team is overloaded, like if you had too much Frappuccino coffee. For more amazing jokes like that one, subscribe and like the video. Haha. Next we have a vape full party Kino. Whale alert! My Kazuha and Yelan are both at Constellation 6, so I did this rotation so that way they're functionally at Constellation 0. Also, my Yelan is built to do almost no damage. This team is entirely reliant on Vapeikino's damage, and she did an incredible job here, dealing over 100,000 damage vapes. Now while testing this, the ICDs were really wonky. Sometimes my first normal attack wouldn't vape, and other times they would vape prematurely. But regardless, Vapeikino is still a strong playstyle for her. But admittingly, both Frappuccino and Vapeikino teams should also be called Squishy Kino, because she is extremely squishy in these teams. Fortunately, we can solve the Squishy Kino team with the Comfy Kino team. Dealing mega PP damage, aka pure pyro damage, this team combines comfort with archaic Zhongli, while still outputting great damage with Bennett and Xiangling. Granted, this still suffers from circle impact because of Bennett, but as we can start to see, Arlecchino is actually surprisingly flexible with her teams. And as per usual I win to lose fashion, let's take Arlecchino out for a nuke showcase. This time with Sapwood Bennett, Instructors Diona, Thrilling Tales Sucrose, and with an EM build on Arlecchino. 780,254 damage from just a single N1. This looks really comical to me because it looks just like a tiny little poke from Arlecchino. Looks like Arlecchino is perfect for disciplining rebellious edgelords like Scaramucci. But why stop here? I took all three of these teams into the bottom half of the Abyss 12 for literally a single run of each, and here are my results. And, well, they all crushed it. Now please do not take this as conclusive evidence that any of these teams are better than the others, because massive amounts of RNG went into these runs, like for example I had a great PMA cycle with the Frappuccino team. Anyway, all these teams were able to comfortably 9-star Abyss 12 with plenty of time to spare. And all of these runs can be improved drastically. Like for the Vapeikino run, I learned a lot more about her vape rotations, which I didn't implement properly throughout the entire run. Anyway, one thing's for certain, both the Frappuccino and Vapeikino teams were very high octane teams, where every time I got hit, it was one step closer to losing a lot of DPS. When Arlecchino uses her burst to heal herself, she loses a significant amount of damage for her next rotation, since she needs to spend a lot more field time and she loses the remaining 30% of Bond of Life for the next rotation. In other words, she's a high-risk, high-reward character in the Frappuccino and Vapeikino teams. Regardless, Comfy Kino still felt great to use and was, well, very comfy. With Zhongli being so damn thick, Arlecchino doesn't have to worry about taking damage nearly as much. Granted, everyone knows that Zhongli is usually a sheet DPS loss. I still think he is incredible with Arlecchino because of the comfort and lack of needing to dodge. Arlecchino's inability to be healed leads to some really interesting dynamics and a unique set of strengths and weaknesses. Against scripted boss fights, it's pretty reasonable to use her with squishy Kino teams. However, once you start fighting aggressive, dangerous, and multiple enemies where it's impossible to practically dodge everything while still outputting near maximum damage, that's where squishy Kino teams start to suffer. Fortunately, Arlecchino is quite flexible when it comes to team building, being great with Overloaded, Vape, and with shields as well. Now you might be a bit dismayed that I've been running her with Bennett this entire time, and frankly, with a White Tassel, Bennett is highly recommended. The flat attack buff that Bennett provides is magnitudes better with a low base attack 3-star weapon like the White Tassel. Another great trait about Arlecchino is that she is surprisingly flexible with her rotations, much like how flexible we'll need to be when she's stepping on us. Her Bond of Life isn't timed or anything, unlike pretty much every single other Infusion character. She can swap on and off freely, and also find opportunities to squeeze out extra Bond of Life, which can be dispensed whenever she needs them. This will lead to some very unique and creative play from the player base, and I personally can't wait to see what people come up with. Now I did want to address the question, is she better than Hu Tao or other Pyro DPS characters? Frankly, I cannot provide a definitive answer in this video. To me though, she feels better to play, not being shackled to the Water Boy or Water Girl, and not needing to frantically input charge attacks with jump and dash cancels. Arlecchino is able to just mash the normal attack button, and then you can focus more on dodging stuff than inputting perfectly timed charge attacks. Also, another neat detail about her is her poor compatibility with Furina. I've always been a fan of when lore accuracy is implemented into a character's gameplay. Not only does Furina make her even squishier, since she cannot be healed by her teammates, this is a major source of fanfare generation that cannot be utilized without large opportunity costs, such as using Arlecchino's burst to heal. Granted, this might not be ideal for players that wanted to use her with Furina. Speaking of Arlecchino's burst, it's also a really interesting design that her burst is actually a net DPS loss. Because of the fact that it removes whatever Bond of Life she has, this means that the next rotation won't actually have the leftover Bond of Life, and thus Arlecchino will do a lot less damage. Still, the burst is far from useless as it is her only way of healing. One thing's for sure though, after using her for a while now, I think she's an incredibly powerful and, most importantly, incredibly fun Pyro DPS character. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.
貫こうここより昇る権限はっざったはっざっとはっと貫こう